This is Mr. Tan, and with these lecture slides we are reviewing global business environment, and we're specifically focusing on P5. Now, in this session we're going to be looking at decision making. So we're obviously going to provide an introduction, and in the introduction we're going to break down the question as we normally do. And look for the key points. We're going to look at decision making itself. What is decision making? Leadership styles, in terms of how different leadership styles can also affect decision making, and some effective concepts in terms of decision making, specifically relating to a global perspective. Decision making is absolutely key to any organization, because every organization are going to be faced with different ways to do things and different routes to take, and the different routes may lead to the same aim and objective, but that route as opposed to another route may cost you more or less money, maybe more efficient or less efficient in terms of adopting that route. So it's extremely important to really make the right decisions, so that you are effective and efficient and competitive in relation to your competitors. So very, very important. So let's look at the question. So the question says to evaluate the different ways decision making can work effectively in a global context. So we already know, we've covered global contexts and international marketing in P1, so you should already know about that already. We're going to be covering decision making, but the key word here is evaluate, and according to the English dictionary, evaluate means to weigh up, to look for the pros and cons. So we need to really be able to break this question down and see how we could possibly answer this question in the assignment brief. And the assignment brief is part of a report format, as you know. So one possible way in terms of breaking this question down, could be firstly to explain, what do we mean by decision making? Next, the process for decision making, effective decision making, different decision making styles, steps in the decision making process, and obviously examples of decision making, wherever possible, to relate this in a global context with examples. So very, very important to do that. Some of the questions that we might be asked are where, when, what, who, how, and why. And again, getting these decisions right is very important in terms of affecting your company in terms of their gross profits and the net profits, and everything that the company does are based on decisions, and these decisions can either make the company more money or cost the company more money. So very, very important. Do you have effective? So when we look at decision making itself, decision making is a process of gathering the information, analyzing information, weighing up information, and then making. Like I said, that unless decision making is degenerated into work, it is not a decision, but really just the best intention. So unless you actually have your decisions and then allocate them to designated tasks where these tasks are actually being done to actually achieve that decision, then really it's no more than just the best intention. It's really regarded as the most important thing that a manager needs to do. Decision making is understood as the management's main task, and it's what the manager must do. When trying to make a decision, a person must weigh up the positive and negatives of each option and consider all the alternatives, and then really to make a judgment call. When we are looking at these decision making, involves gathering information, weighing up, analyzing, making a choice. It involves, as Peter Drucker said, making sure that decision making, translates into work and not just best intentions. We are saying that decision making is really the main task of a manager, and really it's to weigh up all the positive and negatives of each option and consider all the alternatives, and then to make that choice in terms of what the company should be doing. In terms of the decision making process, we can see that the first thing would be to set priorities, make choices, finding a cause, and managing the risk, because in everything nothing is a certainty, and there will always be a degree of risk, and there will always be issues, challenges and problems throughout each. When we look at effective decision making, we are saying to ourselves, well, that we need to go through in terms of making effective decision making would be first to identify exactly what is the problem. What is the problem? What are you trying to actually find out? What are you trying to achieve? Unless you identify that, it's very difficult to get everything towards achieving it if you don't exactly know what you're trying to achieve or what the problem is or what you're trying to fix. So this would then lead on to gathering information, and using, if necessary, primary sources of information gathering, secondary sources of information gathering, but information gathering to find out everything that you can in terms of a internal and external situational analysis. If it's an internal situation analysis using SWOT and external using PESTEL. Obviously reviewing the relevant data and evaluating the possible solutions. Again, when you're evaluating possible solutions, you've used various management strategies like force field analysis. You may want to use force field analysis here in terms of evaluating the possible solutions. And top-down implementation, constantly evaluated by management, looking at all the issues and getting different people's views from different levels of the organization. But effective decision making is more than just following a process. It's also about having the right people, because unless you have the right people with the right skills and the creative ideas, you may not get the right decisions or the most effective decisions or the best decisions. You may want to keep the decisions in small groups rather than being too big groups, because you may not be able to gain consensus on anything if the groups are too big, and there may be different peoples with different opinions. You may want to encourage participation. Definitely, if you don't have all the ideas, to consider everything and to consider all the ideas and all the facts from different points of view can be very important. If you look at the coronavirus and you see the way doctors and different opinions in the UK from the rest of the world, or if you look at how things have gone throughout the whole world and what the UK has or has not done, has it been a good thing or not, to encourage participation from different areas of the industry, from doctors, from from all different areas, to find out what their views are on this respect, as well as participation from other countries. Choose diverse settings and avoid advocacy. So effective decision making will involve more than just following a process of identifying a problem, but it involves as we said, getting the right people, getting our participation, keeping the small groups small, choosing diverse settings, and avoiding advocacy. If we look at the decision making, for instance, for Zara, we can see that with Zara, they are a high street fast fashion retail business, and they have made great successes recently. Great successes in terms of what they are doing and how they've transformed the industry. They started off in Spain with one shop, and now they have over 2,000 outlets in over 90 different countries. And what they have tried to do, or what they have done, is to vertically integrate backwards by achieving growth through diversification with vertical integrations. It adapts culture, designs, manufactures, distributes and retails clothes within 2 weeks of the original design first appearing on catwalks. This is a stark contrast to the average 6 months it takes to produce items in the fashion industry. So can you imagine if your competitor is taking 6 months from the catwalk to putting those designs into the retail shops, and Zara is doing it literally within 2 weeks. But they've had to change their whole process. They have to change their whole way of doing business. They've had to vertically integrate backwards. They own a lot more of the in-house manufacturing. But the other thing that affects decision making, obviously, are going to be the different decision making styles. Going to adopt an autocratic leadership style. An autocratic leadership style in terms of not really gaining participation, but one person telling everyone else what to do and everyone else taking the lead from that person. Are you going to use democratic leadership style? Democratic leadership style in terms of taking the consensus of everyone else and taking everyone else's opinions and going with literally the majority of what everyone else is saying in terms of a democratic perspective. Is it going to be a participative leadership style, participated by getting people's views and listening to what people are saying, and then actually making decisions from other people's views and taking that information on board? Is it going to be a laissez-faire type approach, allowing someone just to get on and make the decisions themselves because you feel that they may have more expertise in that area? What type of leadership style are you going to adopt? Is it going to be transformational leadership style? Transformational, led by a leader who may use parts of democratic and participative styles and with a dream, a mission, a vision, someone who is quite inspirational. Normally in times of crisis or change, an organization may need to use this style of leadership. When we're looking at these different styles of leadership, we're saying to ourselves, which one are you going to adopt? Usually, in a global context, you may want to get more people involved, depending upon, but it may not be large groups of people. It may want to be small groups of people involved to achieve what you want to achieve. But again, that will depend on what you're trying to achieve and how complex the task is or what the problem is. When you're making decisions as well, you're going to want to use different decision-making tools, including prioritization matrices, trade-off tables, using decision trees, and also software programs to use and analyze data. Because if you remember in the process, we said the first thing was problem solving. What is the problem identification. But one of the stages is going to be analyzing the information. How you're going to analyze the information that is coming in. And depending upon how complex it is, you may want to use software programs to analyze the information that you have. So decision making, you need the right people who are capable of using and being able to use certain softwares or have the experience to know exactly what they are going to use and why and what decisions they're going to take and what information is this going to be based on. So the information will need to be analyzed. Now, I can't stress enough the importance of making the right decision. And the right decision, obviously, is going to have an effect on your bottom line. It's going to have an effect on your cost of goods sold. If you vertically integrated backwards like Zara has, and you've got your own in-house manufacturing sites, then if you're not buying it from a supplier, then the overall cost, and you've got over 2,000 stores, you're going to gain more economies of scale, so that your cost of goods therefore will be reduced and your speed of delivery will be increased. So your cost of goods being reduced, therefore your sales minus your cost of goods, if the cost of goods are lower, will give you a greater gross profit. Gross profit divided by sales times 100 gives you a greater gross profit percentage margin. So the decisions that you take are going to affect either your cost of goods sold, or it's going to affect additional costs in your administration charge and your profit and loss account of your company. So if you're incurring more costs and you're not seeing a benefit in terms of greater sales or greater efficiency that's affecting your bottom line, then it's either going to add and decrease your net profit or increase your net profit. So again, this needs to be looked at, and ultimately, as a public or private limited company, you're going to have shareholders and stakeholders who you're going to be accountable and responsible to. So that being the case, you have to make sure that whatever you're doing is actually adding to or increasing your gross or net profit and increasing your bottom line. How decision making can work. It's very important to clarify, it needs to be spelled out clearly exactly what is it that you are trying to find out. What is the problem? What is the opportunity? What are you trying to achieve? Because unless you can spell it out clearly and you know exactly what it is, you're not really going to know how to get there. So that's extremely important. In Zara, I've had the opportunity by saying that we want to turn round in all of our stores, as they do in a 2-weekly batch of deliveries regularly, from the catwalk to the retail stores within 2 weeks. That might have been their main objective, or their problem or their opportunity. So how were they going to achieve that throughout their whole business? To spell it out, to be clear and concise. Determine who, the roles involved, one person, group, at different levels or different organization. If it's senior management, CEO, CO, middle managers, assistant managers, at what level, who needs to do what to make this thing happen, depending upon how complicated the problem or opportunity is. Understand how are these things going to be done? Consensus or vote. Again, your leadership style may determine if you're going to use democratic, participative, autocratic, laissez-faire, or is it going to be transformational? Is it going to be centralized or decentralized decision making? We've seen with various companies like Toyota, when Toyota first went international and then global, they had a centralized decision making process where none of the decisions outside of Japan would be taken unless it came back to the head office and were taken from Japan itself. But later on, as Toyota grew, we saw that in the motor auto industry, it was a very, very competitive, and things were changing fast between different companies as things were becoming even more and more competitive. And the geographical areas like Europe, the Americas, North and South America, Asia, having to react, but then to wait for the decision to come back from Toyota in Japan, took too long. By the time they reacted and the decision came back to say yes, go ahead, it took too long, and the competitors had already moved on from then. So later on, Toyota had then decentralized the decision-making process, allowing the other regions in the world to make their own decisions. So Toyota Europe may decide from Brexit if they want to move their production and manufacturing plants from the UK to within Europe itself, because we don't know if Toyota UK is going to face tariffs or additional tariffs on cars being exported into the EU. But if it is the case, then again, it's not going to bode too well for the cars being sold into Europe, because it's going to add additional costs onto it and make them uncompetitive. Or if they remain with the same retail price, less gross profits as the cost of goods increase. So centralized or decentralized decision making. Again, both centralized and decentralized decision making processes have their advantages and disadvantages. And also, when making a decision making work, it's extremely important to have deadlines and timetables, to make them an explicit schedule, to know what's happening where, when, and with whom, and what the costs will be. Even if we look at BMW, we can see that BMW itself, involves recognizing, identifying, gathering, listing, evaluation, and selection. Decision-making process is very democratic. The management allows others to make decisions. It's not autocratic. It's very, allowing other people to make decisions, because other people actually may know better ways of doing things, and people who worked in those areas a lot longer than maybe, they allow individuals and teams to make decisions. And the decision making at BMW involves a series of steps. Decision making is thoroughly planned in BMW, and they use very efficient and effective techniques. They may use techniques in management that you've already covered, techniques like lean, just in time. They may use CI, continuous improvement, and various other management techniques. Again, when we're looking at this, how does it work? When we said evaluate, let's have a look at the question again. So when we're saying evaluate, so you're looking at the decision making process first. What is actually the decision making process? And then after we've looked at the decision making process, we're really saying to ourselves, what are some of the things that can affect the decision making process? Some of the things that can affect the decision making process are going to be the leadership styles. What leadership style from a global context are you going to adopt? And again, the leadership style will affect the decision making process. And again, these will have both advantages and disadvantages. Decision making tools. Again, will you be using decision making tools that we've looked at? Software, decision trees, prioritization matrices. Then we looked at the example BMW, and we've also looked at the example of Zara. And we also mentioned other companies like Toyota, and whether they're adopting a centralized decision making process or decentralized decision making process. Again, each of them will have their advantages and disadvantages. So I hope this has helped clarify this a bit more. So look at these slides and then use the online books that we provided in business strategy and add to this using case examples in a report format as required in the assignment brief. Okay, thank you from Mr. Tan.